Hi class 5, welcome back to your science class. Today I am going to start with the new chapter called pollination. Okay, so before I begin with the chapter, you need to know what are the things we are going to learn in this chapter. First of all, we need to know, because we are talking about pollination, so we need to know about flower. Okay, the parts of flower, we need to know the names of those parts of flower. Once we are acquainted with those names, then we will understand the types of flowers that are there. Once that is done, then we will move to main part, that is pollination. Now, once you hear this term called pollination, what does it strikes in your mind? Pollination is what? Actually the transfer of anther to stigma. The process of transferring of anther to stigma in a particular flower is called pollination. Now we will learn how the process takes place in flower and what are the things involved during this process. Okay. Now see, we have learned this, that any living thing that are there in this world reproduce, right? So once we get a seed, from seed we again get another plant. And what is the main source of it? Flower. Once we see flower, we know that from flower we are going to get the fruit, and from there the seed, and the process goes on, right? So this process which goes on, germination takes place. You have learned in your last year's class about germination, right? So now you are going to learn about reproduction in plants. How in plants reproduction takes place, how it reproduces. Okay. Before I start the chapter, you need to know the parts of flower. Let's see. As you can see, I have already drawn parts of flower. Okay. Now see, flowers produce what? Fruit and seed. Okay. Now flower contains the reproductive structure. It is the most colorful, attractive part of a plant. Many flowers have a sweet scent which attracts insects towards them. Now, when I am talking about insects, we will again relate to this in the next part. Flowers vary widely in terms of size, colors and shape. Okay. Now, this particular flower is divided into 4 parts. What are those 4 parts? Calyx, corolla, androecium and gynoecium. Understood, children? Now out of these 4 parts, the whole process of pollination takes place, that is reproduction takes place. Let's see how. The outermost hole of a flower called calyx. We start from calyx, okay? It consists of sepals. Now sepal is what? It is green leaf-like parts located at the base of the flower. Okay. Next move on to corolla. When we are talking about corolla, it consists of petals. Most attractive part of a flower. Okay. And petals are brightly colored to attract whom? Insects. It's very important when insects are attracted, and they play a vital role in this transferring of anther to stigma. Then, third hole or androecium of the flower. What is that? It consists of stamens, the male reproductive structure. Now here comes the main structure called male reproductive structure, stamens. Each stamen has a thin stalk called filament. Can you see? Okay. structure at its tip called anther. Now you know what anther is consist of? It consists of the fine powdery substance called pollen grains. Okay. These are male reproductive cells or gametes. Done? So male reproductive part you have understood. Which one? Androecium, where you can see stamen, anther and filament. Okay. And pollen grains are present at the tip. Done. Now move to the female part. The fourth part. What is that? This part or innermost hole is called gynoecium. Consists of carpel or pistil. Okay. Now this is the female reproductive structure. Carpel again has three segments or three parts. The swollen part of the at the base, means at the lower part at the base, is called ovary. Okay. The thin stalk, that is called style. You see the thin stalk called style, and the thickened top part is called stigma. You know, stigma is a very sticky substance. That's why the pollen grains get stuck into that stigma. Now, what plays one more thing is there in this flower, which plays a vital role, that is inside ovary. You can see ovary. Come to ovary. Yes. Inside that you will get ovules. Contain eggs or female gametes. So, this is the explanation of parts of flower. I have explained you what are the parts of flower. You need to know that 4 basic parts are there. Calyx, corolla, androecium, gynoecium. Now, androecium, gynoecium helps in the transfer of anther to stigma. And then what plays another important role played by ovary, and then inside is what? Ovule. Now from here we get fruit and seeds. Okay. So we have understood the parts of flower. Now let us do some other part. Come here. So class 5, first part we have understood the parts of flower. Okay. Now what are the main parts in parts of flower? What you have seen? First is calyx, right? Then you have seen corolla. These 2 parts understood. Then the third part which we have seen is androecium. And the fourth part is gynoecium. Okay. So these are the main 4 parts we are talking about, and this will help us to understand the meaning of pollination. Right. Now, this calyx is related with what? Sepals. Okay. Now, when we are talking about corolla is related of petals, the upper part of sepal. Done. Then, when we were talking about androecium, what we got? We got stamen. Then what we got? After stamen we got filament. And one more thing we got. What is that? Who remembers that term called anther? Now, in this anther particularly contains the powdery substance, right? The fine powdery substance, the light one, very light one, is called pollen grains. Clear? Now the last part is what? Gynoecium. This is the male part. Okay? And this is the female part. These 2 are used for reproduction. Now what is here now? Let us see how many things are attached here. we will see in gynoecium we get carpel or pistil, anything you can mention, no problem. Then you will get ovary, the base part, and what you get? Stigma, right? Ovary is there, stigma is there, and style. Let me write style, the thin stalk or the stem, okay, that is called style. And stigma is what? The sticky substance at the tip, okay. So that is called stigma. Done? And what is present inside this? Ovules. Contains what? The gametes, female gametes or the eggs. Clear? So you need to learn today till this much. This is very important. Okay. Before we go for understanding the pollination chapter, we need to know the parts of flower that are related to flower. Why we need to know? Because these will help us in pollination system. When the pollination takes place, how it takes place, these will only help us to know it. Now, parts done. One more thing we need to know is types of flower, okay, because this types of flower will also help us to understand which type of reproduction takes place. Okay, now in this you will see two types. One, bisexual, and the other unisexual or monosexual. Clear? Now, what do you mean by these two terms? Bi and uni. What do you mean by this? You know, these two are actually, these are based on the presence of the male and female reproductive parts of a flower. Okay? In this way, they are differentiated. Now, when I talk about bisexual, the flowers in which both you will get male and female reproductive parts. Means both are present in one particular flower. That is called bisexual part. Okay, or flower. Done. Next, when I am talking about uni, that means you have already understood either of the one will be present. Either the male part will be present or the female part will be present. Either male or female part will be present. Female part of reproduction of a flower, of a plant, okay, will be present here. So why we need to know these two types? Because here the pollination will take place in a different way, and in bisexual the pollination will take place in a different way. Okay, sometimes we also call this bisexual, means the flower which is having both female and male reproductive part is also called complete flower. That means in that particular flower only you are getting both the things where the transfer of pollen grains takes place. Whereas this part, unisexual, here it is called incomplete flower. Why? Because it is having only one part, either the female or the male part. So if it is having the male part, the transfer will take place in a different way, and even female part transfer will take place in a different way. As I told you at the beginning only, we were talking about insects. So these insects also play a very vital role. I told you, you will get to know here. Okay, but in the next video. So today till this much, we have understood the parts of flower. We have understood the types of flower. Now anybody in class 5, if you have any confusion after going through this video, please do write to me. Then I will explain, and then only I will move for the next topic. Okay, because the next topic is all about pollination. Now this part, you will get the picture this side. You can copy it down. You will get time for that. Okay. And after this, you will get to see one video also about this parts of flower, types of flower and pollination. You just go through. Okay. Just go through the video so that in the next class, we understand this chapter well. Okay. Whatever is there in the pollination, we will go through in the next class. Today till this much. Okay.
The new plant generally grows from a seed. But have you wondered how? As we know, the flower turns into a fruit. Now we also know the insects help in the pollination, that is, transferring of pollen grains from the anther part of the male organ, which is stamen, to the stigma part of the female organ, which is pistil or the carpel. You know, if the pollen grains are transferred to the stigma of the same flower, it is called self-pollination. And when the pollens are transferred from the anther of one flower to the stigma of another flower of the same kind, it is called cross-pollination. As we saw, the pollination happens due to the external agents such as a bee, which is an insect. Other than insects, wind, water also help in the pollination. Hence, all of these are called the agents of pollination. The insects visit the flowers for nectar and transfer the pollens to the stigma. Generally, the insect pollinated flowers are brightly colored, have sweet smell. They are also rich in nectar. Some plants have small flowers and the petals are not brightly colored. They do not produce nectar. The pollen grains are very light in weight and hence easily blown away by the wind. So the wind is the agent of pollination. For example, in the case of wheat, maize, rice, etc. In certain aquatic plants like the seagrass, the pollination is carried out by the water as the water current slowly carries the pollen grains to the other flowers. You know, even few small birds like the sunbird or the hummingbirds, which have smaller beaks, pollinate the flowers. Few bats and rodents also pollinate the flowers. Now let us see what exactly happens after the pollination. As we saw, after the pollination, the ovary swells up, turns into the fruit, and the ovule inside the ovary turns into the seed. The new plant develops from the embryo inside the seed. This embryo develops from a single cell zygote. The zygote develops into the embryo, then embryo develops into the baby plant. So all starts from a single cell zygote. Let us see how the zygote is formed, starting from the beginning. A bee came and dropped the pollen grain in the stigma. Hence, the pollination is done. For the pollination, the pollen grains need to be transferred to the stigma. But why? The pollen grains consist of one kind of gamete cell and another kind of gamete resides inside the ovules. If the pollen lands on the stigma of the right type of flower, the stigma secretes some nutrients. The pollen grain absorbs these and starts growing. A thin tube grows out of the pollen grain. The tube keeps growing, carrying the male gamete. And it grows until it reaches the ovary. The tube reaches the ovary and then it enters inside an ovule and releases the male gamete inside it. Then the male gamete and the female gamete fuse together to form zygote. So when two different types of gamete cell fuse, the zygote is formed and this zygote grows into an embryo. As the pollen grain comes from the male part of the flower, it consists of the male gamete and the ovule consists of the female gamete. This process of fusion of male gamete and the female gamete to form a zygote is called the fertilization. The zygote is formed due to the fertilization. Then the zygote develops into an embryo, then embryo into the baby plant. This type of plant reproduction process is called the sexual reproduction. So, in the sexual reproduction of plants, the gametes participate and the zygote is formed after the fusion of male and female gametes. You know, in certain plants, for example, the hibiscus plant, the same flower has both the male and the female gametes. Hence, the flower is called the bisexual flower or the complete flower. While in other plants, for example, pumpkin, corn, papaya, etc., the flower has either the male gamete or the female gamete. Hence, the flower is called the unisexual flower or the incomplete flower.
So did you watch the video? You understood somewhat? Huh? Now this thing only I will relate in the next class. Okay, we will talk about pollination in the next class. Okay, so today till this much. Take care. Bye bye class 5.